All right, welcome to the program. We have Dr. Gary Sprouse. He is the Less Stress Doc. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. My goal here is to help at least one of the people in your audience and have them have less stress.
Absolutely. And I've been doing a series the past couple weeks on the podcast program here of mental health. So this is going to fit right into that topic for sure. First thing I'd like you to do is just briefly explain. I know you were in private practice as a primary caregiver
Yes.
for many, many, many years before you switched over to be the less stressed doc. So maybe tell people the story of what made you go into this field.
Yeah. Well, as a primary care doctor, you have this intimate relationship with your patients, right? You're seeing them over years. And so they get to know who you are and they learn to trust you. And so they're trusting you initially with their physical problems like their high blood pressure and their diabetes. But as time goes on, they start trusting you with their more intimate problems, their psychological issues, their depressions, their difficulty sleeping, things like that. And what I was realizing was, as a primary care doctor, if you're not addressing those issues, you're you're not even addressing half of their problem. And so I started delving into, okay, what's causing things like depression and what's stressing people out. People would come to me and go, Doc, I worry that I worry too much. And I go, well, then you probably do, right? And so when I started doing the research and looking into stress, I was like, whoa, there's like a lot of books on how to have less stress. And somehow our stress is getting worse. So something's not right there. And so it got me to thinking about a different way to view stress in our lives.
Yeah, I think that we are a more stressed out, uh, uh, civilization. Everyone is stressed everywhere, and I think that things lead to physical ailments. And I think you've talked about this many times, is that how stress can actually, and we know it causes high blood pressure at some point, but it also can cause some clogged arteries and calcification within the arteries of the heart. Speak to that a little bit about how stress can really cause you some other physical ailments.
Yeah. Well, so there's a book that I read called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. It's a great title. And the idea is that he gives you like 300 pages of all the things that stress does to you. And for a
Mhm.
zebra, they smell a lion and they're running away. But then 5 minutes later, when they can't smell the lion anymore, they're back to eating grass and they're hanging out. For humans, because we have the ability of concepts, we smell a lion, we're like, oh, and we run away 5 minutes later. But then we go, oh, what if the lion came back? What if my kid was with me? What if I hurt my back and I couldn't run away? So we don't just stop at 5 minutes and start eating grass again. We are going on and on and on and on about that fear reaction goes on for a really long time. And the fear reaction sets off these chemicals that, as you say, lead to your blood pressure going up, lead to your arteries. So it's your cortisol level goes up and your adrenaline level goes up. And all those things, you're designed to have them, but not forever. And so I tell people it's like your car can go 120 miles an hour for a while, but then it starts breaking down. And that's exactly what happens to humans.
Yeah, I think you spoke in another interview where you were talking about the family dog. I have a dog, you have a dog,
Mhm.
and how dogs are very in the moment where
Yeah.
they get,
Yeah.
someone walks by the window, UPS guys like, rah, 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 and
Yeah.
they go crazy. And then 5 minutes later, they're like, they don't have a care in the world.
Yep. Yep. That's it.
Whereas we have an ability to hold that stress for a
Yes.
long period of time.
Well, we hold the idea that leads to stress. And this, I will say that I had just finished reading this book on time management. It's called 4,000 Weeks. It's a great book. And what he talks about is our relationship with time is what's screwed up. We need to change our relationship with time. And after I read the book, what I got out of it was, oh my God, it's the same thing with stress. It's our relationship with stress that's causing the problem. And what I realize is, so here's my definition of stress, because I've seen a lot of different ways to get defined, right? To me, our environment is always changing and our we are always changing, and our adaptation to the environment between us as the part of the environment is what stress is. So you're always going to have stress in that, with that definition. So it's always going to be there until you're dead and then you're not reacting anymore, right? So rather than trying to get rid of stress, we need to learn how to manage it. But to learn how to manage, you have to know where it's coming from. And that's where my new insight has come into play. So here's the line that I use, is that the majority of human stress is a side effect to our skills. So we have the ability to envision the future. Okay, with that comes the side effect of then worrying about it. So my 1-year-old grandson, he doesn't have future yet. It hasn't built up yet. So guess what? He doesn't worry. Like he doesn't sit at the breakfast table eating his banana going, Dad, how are we going to pay for college? Because it doesn't come up. He doesn't have that skill. Nor does my 90-year-old patient with dementia, because they've lost the skill, unfortunately. And so they don't sit around worrying about, what they look like or what their hair looks like, because they don't have that skill of being able to envision the future anymore. So they don't have the side effect. So when someone says to me, okay, we'll just live for today, you're like, well, you know what? That works. That's what my dog does. That's what my young grandson does. That's what my 90-year-old dementia patient does. They live for today. But guess what? It's our skill of having the future is amazing. And it gives us this incredible step up because we can plan and change things so that the future is different. But if you give up the skill to live for today, well, then wait, what? So the idea of my book then is like, well, how do we keep our skills and lose the side effect?
Yeah, you mentioned the young 1-year-old, 2-year-old doesn't have that outlook on life, and 18-year-olds don't either. So
Oh, actually, they do. We just don't necessarily hear about it.
yeah, I remember
We just did a talk for a bunch of high school kids, right?
oh yeah,
Here's what I realized. Parents think their kids have it easy. And you're like, no, think about this. At 16, you're trying to decide what you want to do the rest of your life when you have no experience how to make that decision. You're trying to find a mate for the rest of your life. Again, when you don't even know what it is that you want, right? You're getting tested on a daily basis for things that matter because now where you go to college or what you do later on in life matters. What? And your body's changing dramatically and your hormones are all changing. Can you think of a more stressful situation? No.
it is stressful, but when you're getting done with school and you have your whole summer to plan and do whatever you want to do, that's a lot different than in adulthood where there is no summer off.
Well, I give you that, but you already know what you're going to do with your life, right? You were a musician, now you're a podcasting, and it's like, so you don't, and you've already done this for 40 years, so you know what it's like. So if you wanted to change, you go, okay, I've done that, I'm going to move on. When you're 16, you don't know what, like, you have no idea, and you're making these life-changing decisions with very little information.
That's true. Definitely true. And you talk about how people handle stress differently. I thought this was very interesting because I really agree with you on this point. Is you really laid out for people how women handle stress and men handle stress completely differently, and it's kind of by design. Why don't you speak to that? Because I thought that was really informative.
Yeah, wow. So when guys, and I go back to like cavemen, right? So in caveman days, guys were out hunting and women were taking care of the kids in general, right? And again, when I talk about this, there's clearly women that do what men do and men that do what women do, but in general, right?
Sure.
So what I found was that if men started worrying about every little thing that could go wrong, they would never go out and kill a woolly mammoth. So they tend to minimize what's going on so that they don't have to deal with it. So they're going, I can kill a woolly mammoth all by myself, right? Like, I got this. Women, on the other hand, are taking care of kids. And so their job is to make sure their kid doesn't die. So they're like, oh, wait, there's a snake. No, don't go there. So they share their stresses among other women because they're all kind of, that means that there's, instead of just 2 eyes on their kid, now there's 10 eyes on their kids. And so how they handle stress is very different. And it gets them into trouble because men are minimizing, but sometimes they minimize so far that we end up calling it denial. And they go to the woman, look, oh, it's going to be okay. Everything's going to work out. And the woman who's been worried is like, oh, okay, that's great. But then it doesn't work out one time. So then the next time when the guy goes, hey, it's all going to work out. You're like, that's what you said the last time. And it didn't work out. And why am I the only one who has to worry? And you get to sit around and drink beer watching football games, right? So, yeah. So the thing that initially gets people together sometimes is what actually drives them apart.
Yeah, and you spoke about how women tend to go with other women because they all talk about their stress together. Well, what stress you got going on? What stress you got on? But
Yeah.
guys never talk about stress amongst each other.
Well, I don't think that's true. They do, but they talk about it in a different way. They're not looking for help. They're just going, man, this thing happened, and right.
Sure.
Women are like, oh, can you help me? Because I don't understand. Right. So the sharing is a way to reduce some of their stresses. For guys, it's just a vent. So the problem that women get into is they absorb the stress of
Yes.
their friends, and that gets them into trouble. So a picture I give people is a sponge. So I see this woman as a sponge, and she's soaking in everybody else's stress. So when I would say to her, like, well, tell me what stresses you have, she goes, well, my son is failing down in Georgia, and my next door neighbor had a stroke, and my friend got cancer. And I'm like, wait, I wanted to hear what your stresses were, right? And so it happens they have a hard time differentiating their own stresses from the stresses around them. And so their sponge starts getting filled up. And as their sponge gets filled up, now the water starts leaking out. But they still have to keep listening to their friends and absorbing that stress. So now they're on, oh my gosh, I'm leaking. And you're like, well, yeah, because you're taking on too much and you're giving everybody else's stress a 10, including yours, right? So now you're leaking because you don't have enough sponge to hold all that in. So one of the things that I recommend to people is like, look, your stresses are a 10. Everybody else's stresses are a 5. Like, doesn't mean they're a 0. That doesn't mean you don't pay attention, you don't listen, blah, blah, blah. But they're a 5. And guess what? That reduces half your stresses, like just doing that.
Yeah, when you were in the medical practice, where you dealt with people with diabetes, high blood pressure, and all these different ailments, did you did you find that people that are stressed and have anxiety and depressed tend to eat worse and eat more because they're trying to help with that stress? You think that's a part of why people suffer physical ailments?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'll tell you this, one of the offshoots of this work on stress reduction has been a new model for addiction. So, as a doctor, I've been trained in the disease model where you have this disease of alcoholism or this disease of drug addiction or whatever. And I'm like, it's not working. I mean, it's nice to say that. I mean, it changes how you think about it, but it hasn't really helped because our success rate in dealing with patients with addiction is in like the 20% range. And that includes really smart people who are in the field, includes patients once they decide they're going to stop. They're really motivated. And there's a lot of money in the system to try and help these people. And you're still getting a 20% success rate. If you went to a surgeon and said, hey, I need my gallbladder taken out, and he goes, all right, well, it's a 20% chance it's going to be successful. You'd like, yeah, I don't think so, right? So I've said, like, I've read a book called, the structure of scientific revolution. And he said sometimes you just have to change the model. And we did that in physics when we had Newtonian physics. And then it wasn't answering some of the questions. And then Einstein came along and said, yeah, no, we got to get rid of that. We have to have a whole different way of looking at it. And you're like, so I think it's that time for addiction. And so the model that I use is called the stress reducer loop model. And what it says is when you're under stress, you find a stress reducer. You find something that's going to make you feel better. And food is just one of those things, right? Alcohol can be a thing. Cigarettes can be a thing. But so can going to church, or so can exercising, right? We have, like, there's literally thousands of ways that people have to reduce their stress. But, and here's the key, when the stress reducer starts causing stress, okay, now you're in a loop. So the picture I give people is like somebody's at work and they have a bad day at work and they stop off at the bar and get a couple beers and they relax and they're feeling better, but then they drive home and get a DUI. So the thing they did to reduce their stress just caused more stress. So then they get home and they're telling their spouse, oh, honey, I just got a DUI and I have to go get a beer. And she's like, what are you talking about? You're getting a beer. You just got a DUI. I know, but this, right. So you can see where that gets you into trouble. So what I tell people is, rather than saying, here's what we tell people now when they use the disease model. You have this lifelong disease that you're going to have forever, that the best you're going to ever do is control it at best, right? You have this psychological problem. You got a genetic defect. Your brain doesn't work right. You're weak-willed. You're stupid. You can't make decisions. What? Like, we don't say those words out loud, but those are all the implications of what we tell people. Who wants to hear that? So what you find is people don't come because they go, I don't want to hear that, until things are so bad. They go, all right, you're right. Okay, fine. I'll admit that I have this lifelong problem. In the model with the stress reduced loop, what I say to them is, look, you're normal and you have stress and you found something that worked. and your brain did what it was supposed to do and it made it into a habit. So now it's a track in your brain, a neurological track. And then somewhere along the line, you realize, hey, you know what? This is causing problems. I got to stop. But now you're stuck because now you're under a lot more stress because of the reducing loop. And two, you got this track in your brain that you now have to inhibit, which is a whole different skill. Like what? Like we can do that, but we're not that great at it. So like if somebody gave, like if I was trying to lose weight and somebody said, hey, here's a donut, you're like, no, I'm losing weight. I'm not going to do that. Right. So you walk past the donut once, then you walk past it again, and then you walk past it the 10th time. But the 11th time you eat the donut, and you're like, right. So your inhibition went away. So in my model, what I'm trying to do then is say, look, we just need to find a way to have less stress, which is where the book comes in, right? And two, we need to find a way to other ways for you to reduce the stress that's left over and make that automatic, make that your habit, make that your go-to. So when someone's had problems with alcohol or cigarettes or whatever, what I say to them is, what is it that you found to reduce your stress? And so like I just had a client, a friend of mine, her son had been sober for 2 or 3 years now, and he lapsed. And the normal question is, what the hell happened? You idiot. Why did you do that? Why did you choose to go back? And what happens is that person feels guilty. You're punishing them. You take away their privileges. You put them in rehab, whatever, right? In my model, here's my question. So you've been inhibiting for 2 years. So what changed that you couldn't inhibit? Which is a way different question. Like that says you've been successful at what you're doing for 2 years. So something changed that made you not. So what was that? And let's explore that. And then let's figure out how to put a little fence around that area. So if that comes up again, so it turned out in this guy's case, he was having some emotional problems with his girlfriend. All right, well, let's put a little wall around that. So the next time that comes up, you don't go down that automatic track that says, hey, go drink some alcohol.
Oh, I love that because it's to me, it's the same model that I preach all the time is that we have to treat root causes. We can't treat symptoms. So to me, in that scenario, uh, the symptom was the drinking. The root cause was the battle with his girlfriend and not being able to handle that.
Well,
So
so I call the alcohol as a treatment, but yeah, I mean, whatever. I think you're right. So what's happened is you've had this problem, and that you treated it with alcohol, and it works, right? It does what it's supposed to do. You kind of numbed up for a couple hours, and it's great. And then you
right.
wake up and you got more stress now because now you feel guilty that you drank, and now you got a hangover, and right, and it's like, yeah. So we just need to find different ways. But my patient would come to me because I took care of about 100 patients. I was using Suboxone in my office, and I took care of 100 patients that had heroin addictions, right? I had a 95% success rate. But that's because I was treating these people as if they were normal. Like, one of the worst stories I have is I worked at a nursing home, and a patient was in his 50s, and he came there because he'd had a lot of problems with addiction, and he'd gotten sick, and he was coming to the nursing home to get better. And before he left, he said, look, when I'm on Suboxone, I'm clean. I'm sober for 3 years. He goes, but if I don't have my Suboxone, I'm in trouble. And I'm like, okay, so we're going to get you Suboxone. Right. So at the time I wasn't writing it. So I had one of the other doctors there say he would write the prescription for him. And then he changed his mind. And so then I called the place where he had been gone. I say, hey, can you guys write this guy a prescription so he has it? And they're like, well, he's not on it now, so he doesn't qualify. And I'm like, what? Like, that doesn't even make sense, right? And they're like, and it was a Friday. Then they finally said, all right, fine, bring him in Monday and we'll write him a prescription for Suboxone. All right, great. So I'm like, he's going to be here over the weekend. We'll send him out Monday. No, the nursing home sent him out on Saturday because his insurance ran out. So they kicked him out on a Saturday, right? Sunday, he overdosed and died.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, I'm devastated because I'm like, this guy didn't need to die. If we had just gotten him a prescription for Suboxone, he'd still be here. But, and this is my concern, the nursing home personnel were like, well, he was a drug addict. He was going to die somewhere along the line, whatever. And you're like, what do you mean, whatever? What? Like, and what I've seen is when people have addictions, we tend to treat them almost as if they're subhuman, like they don't deserve the rights of a human because they're so stupid and brain damaged and like can't make good choices and they lie to us all the time. Blah, blah, blah. Like, no, these people are amazing. They have incredible resourcefulness and skills, and they're smart. They just are in a stress reducer loop. We just need to get them out.
Yeah, something has caused them to, like you said, treat what they're dealing with some, with drugs or alcohol or whatever. So something has caused them to want to, that's their treatment, like you said, that's
Yep.
their treatment.
Yep. Well,
And it
and here's
doesn't
the
work
key.
over a long
So
time
here's the
because
key to this model. So the key is that anything that we do can become a stress reducer loop. So my writing this book could become a loop. Like my wife goes, honey, do you know how much money you're spending on this? How much time you're spending? Blah, 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 right? So it could be a loop, right? So I have to be very careful to moderate it and not do too much of it. I have one of my ladies who used to work for me had a bleach loop. And I'm like, what? A bleach loop? What are you talking about? She goes, when she got stressed out, she would bleach the crap out of her house. Which, okay, fine, you clean your house. That's great. Makes her feel better. I go, but your daughter has asthma, so she can barely breathe when you clean the house. And your countertops are getting destroyed. I'm like, the stress reducer is causing stress. And I go, so you need to stop. She goes, oh, no, I'm not stopping. And you're like, oh, okay. So now you understand that, like, you can see why someone with heroin or with alcohol, it's hard. It's not easy because when you start inhibiting, it's difficult. But it gives you the chance that you're going to be normal. Because I say to people, like, in AA, they tell people, just label yourself as an alcoholic. Hey, I'm Bob, an alcoholic. I'm like, when's the last time you drank? And they go, well, it was like 25 years ago. I'm like, well, what? I said, you have a track in your brain that says, if I get stressed out, I go drink alcohol. But why would you define yourself by that track? I mean, you literally have 500,000 other tracks in your brain that are way better than that alcohol track. Why would you define yourself by that track? It's not even a good track. Like, how about we go? So this is my fun part. I go, well, I'm Dr. Sprouse. I'm a bedwetter. And they go, what? And I go, well, when I was 2 years old, I used to wet the bed all the time. And it's like, but then I stopped. But it all takes is one night of bedwetting again. I'd be back on again, right? No, that sounds stupid to say. Like, why would we say that about somebody, right? So what I tell you then, like, so if you're not drinking or whatever it is that your stress reducer loop was, then you're just normal. If you go back, okay, now you're in the stress reducer loop again, right? So this guy, I was like, okay, now you're back in your loop with alcohol. But in this, the other difference. So I learned this from Smart Recovery. There's a difference between lapsing and relapsing. And we need to make that differentiation. So somebody who lapses, they used once or twice and they go, whoa, and they get back on the horse and go, no, I got to stop, right? The person who relapses is just back on. So I got another client who had ended up in the hospital for his alcohol problems. And he stopped for a week. And I saw a huge difference. His hair was combed. He looked great. He was walking better. And then the next week I saw him, his hair's disheveled. He's kind of bleary eyed. I'm like, oh, he's back on alcohol. So he's relapsed because he's not even thinking about, oh, I need to stop doing this, right? So there's a difference, and how you treat them is different. So a person with a lapse, you go, okay, you did a couple times, you stimulated that track again, get off, and let's reinforce the new track that you were working on, right? Somebody who's relapsed, you got to basically start over again and go, wait, you're back on what you were doing, and that's causing problems. We got to stop and start over again.
Yeah, that's a much harder task, right?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. There was a concept that you had talked about, and I love this, is everyone has the same rooms, we just decorate them differently. That
That is a
just
good line, right? I like that
is
line.
a great line, and when you explain to everyone listening, the deep meaning behind that, I think it's really gonna hit home with a lot of
Yeah.
people.
Well, so when I would say to my patients, I'm writing this book on how to have less stress, like, oh, I need that book. I'm like, yeah, good. All right. And I would say, but if you had less stress, where would you be? And they looked at me like, I don't know. I never got that far. I only one of my friends said this. She goes, well, I know where I don't want to be, but I don't know where I do want to be. And I'm like, yes, that is the problem. We need to know where you want to be, right? It's not enough to say, oh, I don't want to be there. You need to say, where do you want to be, right? So then I started thinking, well, we need to come up with a happy place. And I was talking to my wife and I was like, oh, yeah, where's your happy place at? And I go, well, my happy place is at the beach. And she looked at me real serious and said, the beach is like a big kitty litter box. And I'm like, okay, so that's not your happy place, right? Well, as we started exploring, I was like, wait, our houses have the same room. Our places have the same rooms, but they're just decorated differently. So mine's decorated with sand and suntan lotion and the sun and the waves. And hers is at a lake on a kayak paddling around the water, right? So they have the same rooms. So the rooms, when you start looking at them, you're like, okay, wait, what are the rooms? So the rooms are things like gratitude and feeling fulfilled and having pleasure and love in your life and feeling, there's a term I use called CASH. Okay. So it's an acronym and it stands for feeling connected and feeling in control, feeling accepted and feeling appreciated, feeling safe and having a sense of spirituality, and then having humor, and then having hope. And I was listening to one of your podcasts and they were talking about hope. And I'm like, oh, hope is super important, right? We need that. Because when we're sitting around going, like my friend called me today, and said her daughter had opened up a new bookstore. And she was like, Mom, it's not going well. It's never going to go well. I should just end it all. I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, so when your life is feeling crappy, ending it is certainly one answer, right? That's a permanent answer. But like when you have hope, you go, my life's crappy, but it's going to get better. Well, then you stick to it.
And you speak about blindness and stress blindness, which I've heard you talk about before. So, what do you think are the biggest things that kind of cause us to kind of be blind? Is it just because we're so busy and we just try to push it down? Like, what do you think causes that?
Well, so what happens is there's a certain amount of stress that we all have just getting through life, right? Like the kids are screaming, my dog's barking, my wife is yelling at me. These are just sort of like, they don't get up to the level of like, oh, I'm calling my friend going, I'm really stressed out, because they're just part of life. But it's like the part of the background, and it could be a lot. And it's like, depending on how much stress you have in your life. It's like, so what I realized when I was going to college, I was in Washington, D.C. And my commute, if I drove to the school, it was 15 minutes if it was non-rush hour. But if it was during rush hour, it was an hour. And if there was like an accident or it rained or something, then it was 2 hours. And I'm like, I didn't think much of it, right? I was stress blind. So now I'm living in a rural area, and like if I have to drive back into the city, I'm like, and the horns are beeping and people are doing this, and I'm like, right. I'm sure I was doing that when I was driving as a student, but I just didn't pay attention to it because I was stress blind, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that hits it real nail right on the head for sure. Let's talk about. I like to give people some actionable steps that you would suggest
Sure.
for people who feel overwhelmed with stress and anxiety and all these other things. But can you give just people just a quick couple of things that maybe they
Sure.
can utilize?
So I see people that are overwhelmed, and here's the picture I give them in their head: is that they're sitting in a dark cave where there's no lights, and they hate it. They're miserable. It's cold. It's wet. They're like, I need to get out of here. And they stand up and they hit their head on the ceiling. They're like, ugh. And they put their hand down. They touch them to slime. Like they can't see any lights. They're like, oh, I hate this place, but I don't see any way out. So I'm just gonna lay here and suffer. And my first answer is like, no, there's a way out. See over in the corner there's a little light there. That's the way out, right? So what I find with people in that situation is two things going on. The first thing I call is an S curve. So envision an S, right? So people have 2 or 3 stresses and they're okay. They got that under control. And then a 4th stress comes along and all of a sudden whoosh, they're way up and now they're out of control. So the first thing I say to people is like, look, you got 4 problems right now. And then being overwhelmed becomes a 5th problem, right? We just need to get rid of one of those. I don't even care which one it is. Because if we take your 4 problems and make them 3, you're back under control. So it's not as bad as you think. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, here's the word I use: lumping. So I find that people lump. And I don't know why we do this, but we do. So we go, oh man, I got to go to the dentist and he's going to stick a needle in my mouth. And I just got a flat tire. And my wife was yelling at me. Oh yeah, and then remember yesterday and like they just keep piling on. They just stick it all on, right? And as you get this whole big giant lump of stress, you get overwhelmed. You're like, oh, I don't even know where to get started. It's just too much, right? So the first answer is compartmentalization. Now, and this is the visual I give people when you're compartmentalizing. That means I'm going to keep each problem separate, because here's what I found: every problem by itself isn't overwhelming. So I got a flat tire, right? Whatever. I got a spare. I'd call AAA, whatever it is I'm going to do to fix it, right? I got my wife yelling at me. Well, let me see if I can read a book and figure out what her love language is, right? Or whatever, right? And then I'll get to the dentist and I'll use my relaxation technique and it'll be all right. I'll get her through it. No one of those problems are overwhelming. When you lump them all together, that's when you get into trouble. So the visual I give people is called shoebox. So if you walked in your bedroom and you had 100 shoeboxes, and the bottom was here, and the lid was there, and the left was there, and the right was there, and a piece of paper in between, like 100 of them. You're like, that would be crazy overwhelming. But if you walk in and the box is there, and the two shoes are inside, the paper's over, and the lid's on, and they're all stuffed in your closet, that's a lot of problems, but it's not overwhelming because now they're organized. So now you just take on one box at a time. You look at it, you put it back up, take a second one down. So when you start hearing yourself lump, start thinking shoe boxes so that you don't get overwhelmed.
Yeah, great advice. I mean, what a lot of people bring work stress home into the house, where
Absolutely.
if you just leave it at work, that's not going to be adding to all the stress you have at home too, as well.
Yep, that's part of compartmentalization, and
Sure.
it's a skill, right? It's not something we're used to. So, like, I found myself lumping, and then I have to catch myself going, "Wait, you're lumping," right? So my wife starts lumping. I go, "Honey, you're lumping," which she does not like hearing, by the way.
I
But
bet.
but then she stops, right? Because I'm like compartmentalize shoe boxes, right? So yeah, I
Well,
get
of
that
course.
from my friend, by the way. Her name's Melissa, so she makes me give her credit. I'm like, yeah, okay.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, for me, I'm a rare person that I'm not a worrier, and
Well, you're a guy.
I'm not a huge. I know that is primarily a guy trait, I
Yeah, you're a
suppose.
minimizer, right? My guess.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if
I know
something
that's the way
goes
I
wrong,
am. Right?
it's like, well, it'll work out.
Yeah, see, you're minimizing it, right? So there's a thing that one of the things, and this will be important, right? So guys tend to minimize so that they go, okay, it's not a big. I don't even have to pay attention to it. It's okay, right? But women are worriers, so they're like looking at the future and they're focusing on the bad things that can happen. So when I say to people, "What is worry?" they go, "Well, yeah, I know what worry is because I know what it feels and blah, blah, I can use it." And it's like, so tell me what it is. And you see them start stumbling. Even psychologists stumble because it's like it's So I had to come up with a more concrete definition. So worry is we have this amazing skill that we can envision the future, but we're using that skill to envision all the bad things that can happen. And then we're having the fear reaction right now to all those things, bad things that can happen. So the antidote to that are two things. One is what I call realistic optimism. So we have the ability to choose. What? So instead of focusing on the bad things that can happen, we're going to choose to focus on the good things. And what I see with women, they have a hard time with this because they're so used to focusing on the bad things. So I say to them, okay, write down some bad things that can happen. I go, all right, now write down some good things that could happen. They're like, let me think. What? No, that wouldn't happen, right? So it's like they've trained themselves, and what men do this too. I'm not saying that only women do this, but they've trained themselves to focus on the bad things because they think by focusing on the bad things that will protect them. And what it does is it sets off this fear reaction, which is then running a car at 120 miles an hour, and eventually it starts breaking down, or they're a sponge that starts leaking. So what I say to them is, look, focus on the good things. So it's called realistic optimism. So realistic optimism says, I'm going to focus on good things coming, but, and here's the key, you got to be realistic. Okay. So then that brings in the second tool called the worry organizer. And the worry organizer says it's written down. So you're not running in your head at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? And it's driven into 5 categories. First one is, what am I worried about? So I had a patient who was worried she was going to have breast cancer. Second column, well, why are you worried about that? Well, because my mom and my sister had breast cancer. So then the third column is, well, how likely is it to happen? And how bad is it if it does happen, right? So in her mind, she goes, 100% chance I'm going to get it and 100% chance I'm going to die. And you're like, well, you're living with a death sentence. What? So I said, well, let me give you the real statistics that from medicine, right? So your chance of getting breast cancer, you have a family history of 15%. And she's like, wait, what? And I go, and because we're going to catch it early, your chance of survival are 85%. Well, she had this whole body change because it's like, whoa, she got her life back. So the next column is then, well, what can I do to make it not happen? So we're like, okay, let's get a BRCA gene, self exams, let's do mammograms on a yearly basis, blah, blah, blah. And then the last column, and this is the key, is now you're starting to plan. What if I got it? What if I got breast cancer? What am I going to do? Oh, well, let me make sure my will is placed. Let me make sure that my sister's going to take care of my kids. Let me research the best cancer institutes now when I'm still feeling good, like when I don't have breast cancer, right? So now you get to plan, but without fear. And that's the key, right? So now we get to use that skill of envision the future without fear.
Yeah, and that puts you in a much better place of
Yes.
peace because you know you have a workable plan.
Yes, there you
'Cause
go.
I think when
That's it.
people don't have a workable plan or they haven't done any preparation for anything in life, those things are always gonna be 10 times more stress. When my father died, he had no life insurance, nothing set up at all.
Yep.
And I mean, that makes it, it's already, like you said, it's already gonna be stressful. Like, we can't get rid of stress, but we have to just not keep piling on top of it.
Yeah. Well, so what I found is, and there's a second book that I got involved with Jack Canfield called Mindset Matters. And our perceptions and our mindset changes how we view stress, right? So one of the things, and that's something that we have 100% control of. I was just reading this book about Marcus Aurelius, right? And he's like, he's a stoic is what they call it. And what he said is, like, we can't control the environment very much, and we can't even control our own body very much, but we can control our mind. And what I see is people ask me what's good stress and bad stress. I'm like, that is something that we make up. Like, something could be really bad, we perceive it as bad, but then it turns out it's a good thing. So, like the story I tell is, this guy is a farmer and his 18-year-old son breaks his leg, and he's like, "Oh, he broke his leg. This is horrible. Oh, what am I going to do? How am I going to get the fields he's sowed?" Blah blah blah. And then the next day, the military recruiter, he comes to get his son into the army, and he goes, "Well, my son just broke his leg." He's like, "Oh, well, then we can't use him." And you're like, "Wait, so this bad thing just turned into a good thing, right?" And it all has to do with perceptions. And so we can adjust our perception so that something that looks bad isn't necessarily bad, could actually turn out to be a good thing. So, like, yeah. So, but that's in our control. So when I talk about good and bad stress, it really comes down to what you think is good and bad stress. So I was talking to somebody the other day who feels a lot of pressure when she was trying to perform. And I'm like, okay, but she thinks it's a good thing because it makes her perform better. I'm like, well, then that's good. Because I was interviewing this guy a couple of years ago, and he was a musician, and he had been playing for 40 years. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome, right? He goes, yeah, every time I go on stage, I throw up before the show. And I'm like, what? For 40 years, you've been throwing up? Like, really? Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know if that's see. Then you're like, yeah, I don't know if that's a good thing or not, right?
Yeah, that's a little bit much. Yeah, I've been
Yeah,
performing for 40 years, and yeah, some people get real stressed out about it, I
they
think.
do. Right? Yeah.
But mindset is everything. I mean, if
It has a
we
lot to do with it.
we run across people who are like, "Oh, today's show is going to be terrible because of this reason or that reason." It's like, well, you already put it in your mind now that it's going to be terrible. How you gonna get out of that now?
Yep. Mhm.
You have
Yeah,
to go
I
into it.
said this to my stepson. He was bartending, and he didn't like it. And I'm like, just go to work and think of all the good things that are happening, all the big people that you're gonna help, money you're gonna make, blah 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 blah. And he came back that night and he was miserable. And I'm like, what happened? He goes, I didn't do anything you said. And he goes, and I was miserable at work and I got no tips. I'm like, yes, that's exactly what happens. Yes, you can change that.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Oh, awesome. Great advice. Great advice. I love everything you say. I'm a big proponent of it and appreciate everything you said. Why don't you just talk about this newest book real quick as we wrap things up, The Highway to Your Happy Place.
Yeah, so the Highway to Your Happy Place, a roadmap to less stress. It has the definition of the rooms, right? It tells you all about the different rooms so that you know where you're trying to get to your happy place. And then the second half of the book is, these are the stresses that are keeping you from being there. And it's worry and guilt and regret and boredom and self-esteem and being overwhelmed. And then I have other books in my head that need to get written, like on grieving and time management and things like that, right? So by getting rid of the stresses, then you can spend that much more time in your happy place. And thinking of the stresses as side effects to our skills allows you to say, well, I want to keep the skill because the skills are important. I just want to get rid of the side effect. So that's where I think the book comes in. And then I made an online course because some people get this information, they take it in differently, right? So there's an ebook and an audio book, and there's an online course that people can sign up for. So if they just go on the website, thelessstressdoc.com, then there you can download a chapter on worry. You can get on the online course. You can, but here's what I see. When you're writing a book, you have to write it generically because, like, here I have you and I can see your reactions and like you're getting it or you're not getting it. When somebody's reading a book, I don't know who they are. I don't know where they're coming from, what their stresses are. So I give people my email address, lessstressdoc@gmail.com, because then I can personalize that information.
Oh, that's great. That's excellent. Excellent. Awesome. Well, I will put all the information in the discussion notes below, and we'll get you all hooked up to Dr. Gary Sprouse's website and all of his information so you can purchase the book, download all the materials, and we'll get all that information out to everybody.
That'd be awesome. And again,
Awesome.
I hope that we helped at least one person today. That would be awesome. That would be good for
That's
you and I.
absolutely. That's all it takes. If we can just help one person make their life easier.
Yep.
All right, Dr. Gary Sprouse, the Less Stress Doc. Thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you.